Today we're going to be tackling a topic that you brought to our attention, and it's energy independence.
Right.
Your article, "The Government Won't Save You: Why You Need Energy Independence," really hit a nerve,
Yeah.
especially the parts about our aging power grid and the rising risk of blackouts.
Right.
It really got me thinking, are we really on the brink of like a power crisis?
That's a valid question. And honestly, your article is not being dramatic at all. The American power grid, you can kind of think of it like a vintage car.
Oh, okay.
It was built in the 50s and 60s,
Mhm.
expected to last about 50 years.
Right.
And we are pushing way past its prime.
Wow.
The American Society of Civil Engineers actually gives our energy infrastructure a near-failing grade.
Oh, wow.
And, we're all seeing the consequences, right? More and more power outages, even in places that we never expected.
That's a little unsettling. I mean, the article mentions rolling blackouts becoming more common nationwide. I know you've done a little research on this, so can you kind of paint a picture of what's happening?
Absolutely. So remember those fire prevention blackouts in California?
Yeah.
Millions of people were in the dark for
Right?
days to prevent wildfires.
Wow.
And then in Texas, millions lost power during that winter storm a couple of years ago,
Oh, yeah.
which led to some pretty tragic consequences.
Yeah.
And those events, they really show just like the extreme strain that the grid is under.
Right.
And it's not just those headline-grabbing cases.
Mm-hmm.
Smaller regional outages are increasing too.
Oh, wow.
It's a system-wide issue,
Right.
and it's happening everywhere.
So even where I live,
Even where you live. Think about how your area is susceptible to,
hurricanes.
exactly, hurricanes.
Yeah. We get those every year, it seems like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's scary.
The article argues that the government's response to this has been a little underwhelming.
Yeah.
Underfunded infrastructure bills, slow improvements. It doesn't sound like a quick fix is coming anytime soon.
You're right. There is bipartisan recognition of the problem,
Okay.
but translating that into action is where things get a little messy.
Right.
Infrastructure bills are often stalled by politics.
Yeah.
Funding gets redirected.
Of course.
And even with progress, the pace is just so slow compared to the urgency of the situation.
Right.
Plus, our regulatory system, it really wasn't designed for today's challenges.
Like what?
Like integrating renewable energy sources,
Mm-hmm.
managing the growing demand from electric vehicles,
Yeah.
and just like fending off cybersecurity threats.
It's a lot.
It is a lot for this aging system to handle.
So if the government isn't stepping up fast enough, what does that mean for like the average person? I mean, the article paints kind of a bleak picture of what happens when the grid goes down. Food spoiling, medical devices failing, losing heating or cooling, not being able to work, security risks. It's a lot more than just an inconvenience.
It is, and we've become so dependent on the grid that I think we forget just how vulnerable we are without it.
Yeah, that's true.
These outages, they aren't just temporary annoyances. They can have some pretty real consequences.
Right.
Imagine like the financial hit,
Yeah.
lost income,
Yeah.
wasted food,
Yeah.
damaged appliances.
It adds up.
It really does. And then there's safety and security, right? Medical devices going offline,
Right.
security systems failing, not being able to call for help.
Yeah.
These aren't just hypothetical scenarios.
Yeah.
These are real risks we need to be prepared for.
So while we wait for these large-scale solutions from the government, it might be wise to consider some like individual steps that we can take.
I think so too.
Speaking of solutions, the article proposes something called the ultimate off-grid generator as a way to address this vulnerability.
Yeah.
And it claims to be a hybrid system, modular, with battery storage, smart power management, weatherproof, silent, and zero emissions. It almost sounds too good to be true.
It definitely checks a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
And on paper, it seems like a very compelling solution. Let's maybe break down what those features actually mean.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Hybrid design basically means that it combines different energy sources
Okay.
for more reliable power generation.
Okay.
So think solar panels for sunny days,
Mm-hmm.
maybe wind power if you're in a breezy location,
Right.
and potentially even a backup generator for those times when nature isn't cooperating.
Okay.
So this ensures you're not completely reliant on a single source.
Okay, so it's not putting all of its eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
What about this modularity the article keeps mentioning? What does that even mean?
Think of it like Legos
Okay.
for your energy system.
All right.
Modularity means you can start with a smaller setup and easily add more components as your needs grow.
Gotcha.
So you don't have to invest in this massive system all at once. You can scale up gradually,
Okay.
which makes it, more manageable.
Right.
Financially and just in terms of installation.
That makes a lot more sense. And then the battery storage is pretty self-explanatory, right? It's like a
Yeah.
giant power bank for your home, so you have electricity even when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing.
Exactly. It gives you that buffer to
Yeah.
cover those gaps in renewable energy generation.
Right.
And it ties into the smart power management feature.
Okay.
This is essentially like the brains of the operation.
Gotcha.
It automatically optimizes energy usage,
Okay.
drawing from solar panels when available,
Mm-hmm.
supplementing with battery power when needed,
Right.
and even switching to the grid if absolutely necessary.
So it's like prioritizing the most efficient and cost-effective energy source at any given time.
Exactly. It's all about maximizing efficiency
Right.
and ensuring a consistent power supply.
So it sounds like this ultimate off-grid generator aims to provide a truly independent energy solution, one that's adaptable, reliable, and environmentally friendly. But is this really a realistic option for like the average person? I mean, wouldn't something this advanced be super expensive and like complicated to set up?
Those are valid concerns, and honestly, the article kind of glosses over some of the potential downsides.
Okay.
While the concept is intriguing, we need a healthy dose of skepticism.
Right.
We'll delve into those aspects more in part 2.
Okay.
We'll explore both the potential benefits and pitfalls so you can have a more balanced perspective before getting swept up in the hype.
That sounds like a perfect segue into part 2 of our deep dive. All right, so we've established that the grid is in a bit of trouble, and this ultimate off-grid generator is promising to be the solution. But is it really like the answer for everyone? I mean, going completely off-grid, that's a pretty radical change, isn't it?
It is a significant shift. The article really emphasizes this idea of moving from being a passive consumer, reliant on the power company,
Right.
to becoming your own energy provider. And that's where the allure lies for a lot of people. Imagine having control over your energy costs.
Yeah.
Knowing that your lights are going to stay on no matter what's happening with the grid.
Right.
It's pretty appealing, especially in today's, kind of uncertain world.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
This idea of self-sufficiency is definitely appealing, but how feasible is it really for like the average person? I mean, are there any downsides that the article might be overlooking?
You're right to question that. The article does present, a somewhat idealized view of off-grid living. Let's be realistic.
Yeah.
For starters, there's the upfront cost.
Right.
These systems can be a significant investment, and not everyone has the financial resources to, make that leap.
And what about maintenance? I
Yeah.
mean, the article mentions it being pretty simple, but any complex system requires some level of upkeep, right? And I'm not exactly an electrician.
You've got a point. Even with user-friendly designs, there will be maintenance.
Right.
You'll need to, understand the system, troubleshoot issues,
Right.
and possibly invest in repairs or replacements over time.
Right.
It's not something to just jump into without considering that long-term commitment.
And let's not forget about like the space factor. Depending on the size and complexity of the system, you might need a fair bit of real estate to accommodate it.
Yeah.
Not everyone has a sprawling rooftop or a giant backyard, especially in urban areas.
That's another valid consideration. Not everyone has the space for a large-scale renewable energy setup.
Right.
And then you also have to think about the regulatory hurdles.
Okay.
Depending on where you live, there may be local ordinances or building codes you need to navigate. It's not as simple as just, buying a generator and plugging it in.
So it sounds like while energy independence is a pretty tempting idea, the road to getting there isn't exactly paved with sunshine and rainbows. There are practical obstacles and costs to consider.
Exactly. It's essential to approach this with a realistic mindset.
Okay.
Understanding both the potential benefits and the potential obstacles.
Yeah.
There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right.
And what works for one person might not be feasible for another.
So it's about finding the right balance for your individual circumstance.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Okay, let's say someone is genuinely interested in exploring this path. What would be like the first steps they should take?
Yeah.
The article mentions something called an energy audit. What exactly does that involve?
An energy audit is kind of like a financial audit,
Okay.
but for your home's energy consumption.
Okay.
It identifies areas where you're using energy inefficiently
Gotcha.
and highlights opportunities for improvement.
Okay.
This could involve, checking insulation levels, assessing appliance efficiency,
Right.
analyzing your heating and cooling systems,
Right.
and even looking at your lighting choices.
So it's about understanding where your energy is going before you start making changes. Kind of like tracking your spending habits before creating a budget.
That's a great analogy. It's about getting a clear picture of your energy consumption patterns
Right.
so you can make informed decisions about how to reduce waste and improve efficiency.
And once you have that information, the article suggests focusing on efficiency measures
Yeah.
before investing in any off-grid setup. Why is that?
It's actually a really smart approach. By reducing your overall energy needs,
Okay.
you might be able to downsize the scale of your off-grid system
Right.
that can save you money
Yeah.
and make the transition, more manageable.
Right.
Plus, it's good for the environment regardless of whether you go off-grid or not.
What kind of efficiency measures are we talking about? Give us some examples that people can actually implement.
There's a whole range of options.
Okay.
Some are super simple and inexpensive, like switching to LED light bulbs.
Right?
They use significantly less energy than traditional incandescent bulbs, and they last much longer.
Right.
Another easy fix is sealing air leaks around windows and doors
Right.
with weather stripping or caulk.
To prevent drafts.
Exactly. This prevents drafts and reduces the strain on your heating and cooling systems.
Okay.
And using smart power strips to cut off, the call phantom energy drain
Oh, yeah.
from electronics.
Those little red lights.
Yeah, those little red lights that stay on even when devices are turned off can actually make a difference over time.
Wow. I didn't know that. Those are things most people can do without breaking the bank or needing special skills.
Absolutely. And then there are more involved measures,
Okay.
like upgrading to energy-efficient appliances.
Okay.
Look for the Energy Star label when you're shopping for new refrigerators, washing machines, dishwashers, that kind of thing.
Right.
Improving insulation in your attic, walls, and crawl spaces can also significantly reduce energy loss, especially if you live in a colder climate.
Yeah.
And then installing programmable thermostats
Okay.
to optimize your heating and cooling schedule
Yeah.
can save you money and energy without sacrificing comfort.
Right. Okay, so you've done your energy audit, implemented efficiency measures, and you're ready to explore those off-grid options. What's next?
The article recommends starting with critical systems backup.
Okay.
Identify the essential appliances and devices you need to keep running
All right.
during a power outage.
Sure.
This might include your refrigerator, freezer, to prevent food spoilage,
Sure.
medical equipment if you rely on it,
Right.
a sump pump to prevent basement flooding,
Okay.
and maybe a few lights and outlets for, basic needs.
So it's about prioritizing and starting small rather than trying to power my entire home off-grid from day one.
Exactly. You can build your system gradually, expanding as your needs and resources grow. And that's where the modularity of this ultimate off-grid generator we discussed earlier really comes in handy.
Right? You can start with a smaller system and gradually add capacity as your budget allows or your needs change. That's a big plus. But even with these steps, I'm still wondering, is this off-grid living thing really a solution for everyone? It all sounds very individualistic, me taking care of myself, my family, my home. But what about the bigger picture?
That's an excellent point, and
Yeah.
one that the article doesn't really address.
Right.
There's a potential societal impact of widespread off-grid living that we
Right.
really need to consider.
Yeah.
It's not just about individual choices, it's about understanding the potential consequences
Right.
for the community as a whole.
Okay, so we've talked about the aging power grid, this allure of energy independence, and some steps you can take to become more self-sufficient. But like you just said, there's this bigger picture, a potential societal impact that we need to unpack.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's tempting to focus on individual solutions, but widespread off-grid living could actually have some unintended consequences.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, consider this. If everyone goes off-grid, what happens to the existing power grid?
Mm.
It's this massive interconnected system that needs a certain level of participation
Right.
to function efficiently and to remain affordable.
Yeah.
A mass exodus of people generating their own power, it could lead to instability,
Yeah.
higher costs for those who remain connected, and even, difficulties maintaining and upgrading the infrastructure.
So there's a potential tragedy of the common situation here.
Yeah.
Where individual actions, while rational in isolation, could collectively kind of harm the shared resource.
Yeah.
That's a little ironic, isn't it? We're
Yeah.
trying to solve one problem and potentially creating another.
It's a valid concern. And then you also have equity and accessibility considerations. We've
Yeah.
talked about how off-grid solutions require, upfront investment,
Right.
technical know-how, and often physical space.
Yeah.
And not everyone has equal access to those resources.
So we could see a scenario where wealthier, more tech-savvy individuals are able to achieve this energy independence while others are kind of left behind, stuck with an increasingly unreliable and expensive grid.
Uh-huh.
That would just further widen the social and economic divides that we already have.
Precisely. It's crucial to consider these potential inequalities, as we move towards a more decentralized energy system.
Yeah.
We need to ensure that the benefits are shared by all members of society, not just a privileged few.
Wow. This conversation has taken an unexpected turn. We started with this really intriguing article about energy independence, and now we're grappling with all of these complex social and economic questions.
Yeah, it really highlights the interconnected nature of our systems.
For sure.
Individual choices have ripple effects, and sometimes what seems like a simple solution can lead to unforeseen consequences.
So what's the takeaway here? Is energy independence a good thing or a bad thing?
I don't think it's about good or bad. It's about recognizing the complexities
Okay.
and approaching the issue with nuance. There's no denying that our current energy system has problems.
Right.
The grid is aging, it's vulnerable, and it's struggling to keep up with demand.
Right.
Solutions like this ultimate off-grid generator, they offer appealing possibilities.
Right.
But we need to be mindful of the potential downsides
Yeah.
and ensure that the transition is equitable and benefits everyone.
Okay.
It's a balancing act.
I'm starting to see that. It's not as simple as just flipping a switch and going off grid. It requires careful planning, thoughtful policy decisions, and a commitment to addressing these broader societal impacts. It's a challenge, but it's one that we really need to face head on.
Absolutely. And that's where informed citizens like yourself come in. By engaging in these conversations, understanding the trade-offs, and advocating for equitable solutions, you can help shape a more sustainable and resilient energy future for everyone.
Well said. This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's clear that the path to a better energy future is more complex than just slapping solar panels on every rooftop.
Oh.
It's about recognizing our interconnectedness, making informed choices, and working together to create a system that benefits all members of society.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
A huge thank you to you for sharing your insights and expertise, and an even bigger thank you to you, our listener, for submitting the article that sparked this really fascinating conversation.
It's always a pleasure to dive deep into these important topics and explore different perspectives.
We hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought and maybe even inspired you to take a closer look at your own energy choices, while also considering those broader implications of those choices. Because ultimately, it's not just about individual energy independence, it's about creating a sustainable and equitable energy future for everyone.
And on that note, we'll sign off for today. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.